Hey guys,
Hello.
welcome back to Wanting into Wellness. Nearly got it wrong, Wanding into Wellness. Today we are here as part of our pregnancy, birth and postnatal series to talk to Rachael Fionda. Rachael is the director of the Language Centre at UCD, and Rachel contacted us last week, kind of out of the blue, but in a very prescient moment because we wanted to talk. A large part of this podcast, obviously, is around sharing birth stories. It's around sharing, the science and the human experience of birth from beginning to end. But we also wanted to talk about, times when that doesn't go to plan and times when that doesn't work out, and to help maybe those who don't have a voice or those who feel that they're robbed of a voice in that conversation to feel like there are people out here who have similar and shared experiences to contact. And so in the month that is Baby Loss Awareness Month, Rachael, yes, amazingly out of the blue contacted us, and she's had just such an experience only in the last year. I'm right saying
April.
April. Wow. Okay, so we just wanted to have you on basically to share your story and tell us, what was this? What was the start of this for you? How are you able to speak about it for a start? I mean, I'm kind of amazed by that. It's such a fresh thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no time scale when it comes to losing a baby. There's no time scale with grief. I could be riding a more positive wave right now, and I can feel that I am. And then in a few weeks' time, I could be riding a very different wave. But when I contacted you, I felt that it was the right time to share for whatever reason. Maybe it being Baby Loss Awareness Month, and just because I've known you for so long,
Yeah.
so somebody I trust my story with.
Okay. Well, wow. Well, thank you very much for that. Like, can you talk us through, because you have so you have three children.
I have two. Well, I have
Well,
three
three
children.
children,
I have three
yes,
children
yeah.
with our angel, and I've a 9-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son.
Wow. Okay.
We did decide to start at the beginning, actually, because you play a role in this. We did
Okay.
decide it was time for our third child, and I am normally very fortunate with pregnancies. Fall very easily, have lovely pregnancies, but we were having a few problems. And it turns out that my thyroid wasn't quite right. So I spoke
Oh,
to
yeah.
you. We bumped into each other outside of the hop sack.
Mm.
And we always have the chats. And you recommended Dr. Neville Wilson.
Yeah.
So I went to see him. He put me on some medication. And once that kicked in, really lucky to fall pregnant with our third child. And I just thought it would go like every other pregnancy I've had. And it did. I didn't have much sickness. I was healthy. I was working. I was looking after my two kids. I was kind of a bit tired, but
Yeah.
that's absolutely normal. And because I'm an older mum, I was 40 when I fell pregnant with him. We decided to do prenatal testing. So it's a private test that you can do. Lots of people have different feelings on this, but for us, we thought we'd always want to give our children the best chance. So if there is something, then you can be sure you get the best care during your pregnancy, and you know a little bit more about the baby. So
And this will tell you about genetic defects or these sorts of things.
so they draw your blood, and after a certain point in your pregnancy, placental blood cells can be found in your own blood.
Okay.
So they can analyse that, and they can do a lot with that. And like I said, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes do we know too much, but we decided that this was right for us. And if everything's okay, the receptionist from the clinic calls you back and says your baby is low risk for all of the things we screen for. And it's a screen, but it's a very, very accurate screen. And for us, we got a phone call from the consultant. So it was saying, so I was 11 weeks pregnant, and the consultant said, your baby has Down syndrome. And so that was already immediately put us into the category of a vulnerable pregnancy. So we went through a roller coaster of emotions, as you can imagine. I remember my husband's first words were, well, this little baby will be loved. But that's not to say it wasn't an easy road for us.
No.
You were kind of immediately thinking of, so a baby with Down syndrome can be healthy, or a baby with Down syndrome can have all sorts of
Like comorbidities.
health issues, particularly with the heart or the bowel, and you don't know quite often until the baby's born or the baby grows up a little bit how the baby will be affected by Down syndrome. I've worked with children with Down syndrome before, so it wasn't something I was hugely fearful of. I was more fearful of, will the baby be healthy? Ronan really struggled, and we really had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of difficult conversations. He was like, we can't do this. but with a lot of faith and hope. And then
Wow.
sometimes with a lot of absence of faith and hope, and then we found the faith and hope again. And we had an early scan. We still haven't told anybody we were expecting, because we wanted to get our heads around this, that we were expecting a really special baby.
Yeah.
And every baby's special, but this is going to be such a different journey. And then we also wanted to make sure that his heart was healthy. You can't really tell, but we just wanted a bit more certainty. And so, you're starting to get excited. I'd signed up for this sign language course that they recommend with children with Down syndrome. We'd spoken to a lot of families. We're like, we can do this. We knew that the older children would be amazing, because they're great kids.
Yeah.
And what happened was my older daughter was rushed into hospital with a very serious hip infection. This was a Friday morning.
Wow. Random hip infection.
Hip infection. It's really rare. She was in a lot of pain. She was so resilient though. I was so proud of her. And then she found out that she'd have to, we just thought it was just pulled a muscle. But anyway, they were like, no, your blood marker is quite high. You need to go to hospital. You need to stay in hospital. You need scans. And I'm kind of telling you, okay, we're going to have a few days in hospital. It'll be an adventure. Mom's never going to leave you. And then I went into labour.
Wow.
So, I want to say at this point it's not connected to being in hospital. It's just Down syndrome babies have a high risk of miscarriage throughout the body.
Okay.
Can sometimes recognise that there's an extra chromosome present and that the pregnancy won't be viable.
Yeah.
And I had to get to Hollis Street.
Whoa. Wow. And that was at how many months pre?
So I was 4 months pregnant.
Jeepers. And so Edith is gone into hospital and you've gone to another hospital.
Yeah, so I had to leave her, which was the worst thing about the whole day.
I can imagine.
And ironically we were going to tell the kids that weekend, and then start telling everybody. But no, we never got the chance. My waters broke. And I'm really open about this because you don't know the ins and outs of it, but my waters broke. So I told the doctor who was attending to Edith, and he said, okay, and he got a nurse and she said, you need to get to Hollis Street now. And I said, I can't leave her. I don't know, you need to go now.
Wow.
So we phoned round. My husband was just putting the 2-year-old to bed. He got care for the 2-year-old.
Oh, so it's evening time as well. Oh, jeepers.
Yeah, I made sure somebody went straight to Edith, family friends who live close by. Ronan came to me, couldn't come in because of COVID.
Whoa, of course, in the middle of COVID.
To Edith, but I think your body is so wise, and at that point my waters broke, and I now know that when your waters break, 99% of the time, especially that gestation, it's the start of a miscarriage. So a miscarriage isn't an event, it's a process. But my body very kindly said, okay, your water's broken, but this will be okay, Rachel. So that's what I was saying to myself. I was focusing on my daughter, of course, but I was like, I will go to the hospital, they'll probably discharge me in a few hours. If I'd have known everything that was ahead at that moment, I would have broken down.
Wow.
But my body was protecting me, and not quite shock. I was with it, but it was like, just get to the hospital.
Yeah, it all feels kind of quite practical and kind of,
and
you're still in mum mode as well.
Yeah, just get back to Edith as soon as you can. So, you go to Hollis Street. It's a lovely old building. It's cold, and the staff were just incredible. And then the next day, I'm kind of, researching what happens when your waters break. Thinking, you find this one story in a million where everything's going to be okay. And very slowly, the staff let me come to my own conclusion that this was the start of having to deliver our baby. And then my waters became infected. So immediately, even though my little boy he was still alive at that point, so I couldn't quite understand that. I was saying, what are you saying? He has a heartbeat. And they were like, that can happen, but this is the start of the process. And we need to help nature now, because if you become badly infected,
your life's at risk as well.
Your life's at risk, and you've got 2 children at home. So we need to help this process along. And I went to a very dark place. I was by myself at that point. Ronan, my husband, was arranging to get to the hospital, but I just went to that very dark place. There's a line in Dante's Inferno, and it's abbandonate ogni speranza voi che entrate, which means abandon all hope, all ye who enter. And it's that utter hopelessness, that every cell is devoid of any positivity.
Wow.
So you're sitting there in that dark place thinking, I couldn't even communicate with the baby at that point, so I felt very separated from him. We knew he was a boy. I just went to a very dark place, but I'm glad that they let me come to that conclusion slowly. and with compassion.
And is like, are there actual like communicable thoughts in your head, or is it just bleak? It's just black, yeah.
Darkness. But then I started, what helped me was I started communicating with our son again. I started, saying, at first I was almost begging him to stay. Saying, please stay. Just please stay. Please let this be wrong. But it wasn't wrong. And I started feeling a very small feeling of peace. Just a small bit of light, a small bit of peace. I started feeling, do you know what, now isn't the time for joy, but it is possible after this.
Wow.
And I think that's because I was talking to him. And then my husband came, so at that point I'd been in almost 24 hours, and they said, we need to start this now. And they start you with medication. And my husband and I had some of the closest and loveliest conversations you have in years. You're so busy running around after the kids are working. We just talked, and we talked, and we talked, and we sent her some love, and Edith was okay. She was with her dad, who travelled to look after her, and Gabriel was with family friends, having the time of his life. And so we knew we could just cocoon, and we only had to take care of us and the birth of our son. And kind of nothing was happening, and the midwives and the registrar were like, you should be in pain by now. Is that you're not feeling that? No, I just feel peace. He'll come when he's ready. And about 48 hours after I came in, so 24 hours after the medication, Ronan wrote him a letter, a goodbye letter. I'd written him a poem, and I just had this really quiet half an hour of meditating, saying, it's okay, it's safe, you can come, don't be scared. Mom and Papa are here, and we're ready for you. And without any pain whatsoever, the registrar just came in to check me, and I felt him coming. And he was born, and it was a beautiful experience. It was so peaceful. It was pain-free. Not everybody has that, but for us, that was his birth. And I mean, just the care and the love and compassion from the people at the hospital made all the difference. He was born, and they said, we're just going to take your beautiful baby away for a moment to check. And I'm so grateful that they said that, because he was beautiful. Now, the placenta's not meant to come away this early, so it's stuck pretty hard. Okay. And you usually have to have surgery, and I think it's important to mention that it's not an easy birth because the baby's small. It's a birth. We were lucky that the placenta came out, and then I was able to spend time with our son. So they're bringing you this tiny baby, a baby you should never see at this gestation. Looks nothing like what you expect a baby to look like. Their skin is so precious and translucent, and it's like shiny red, but there's this baby with fingernails. Every single part of his body was just beyond perfect, and they'd wrapped him up in a little white blanket, and he looked so peaceful. He looked like he was smiling, and even that, and it's such a personal choice as to whether you spend time with your baby after a loss, and every woman's decision is the right one for her. I remember feeling all gung-ho about it, like I'll be spending time with my baby. And Ronan was like, I'm not so sure. Whereas when it actually happened, I was like, God, I was really nervous and scared. And Ronan was the one who was like, we can do this. Ronan really was my rock throughout all of this. And we just spent time with him. I read him my poem. We played a really beautiful piece of music from one of Ronan's relatives who's a harpist. I think it's called Daniel's Lullaby. Really beautiful piece of music. When I listen to it now, I'm taken back to that room. Ronan read him his letter. We cried, we laughed, but it's strange that after a while I felt this huge weight of responsibility for him, as if he was my living child. I just felt like he was in the room, and if he was in the room I couldn't relax because I had to be watching over this little boy.
So that sense of maternal kind of vigilance is wow.
And so after a while I said, would you mind taking him to rest now? And I need to sleep. Because at that point I started thinking about the two children at home. I thought if he's in the room, I will just look at him all night, and I need to sleep. And again, that's a really personal journey.
It's a really difficult one to go through. That's a really difficult moment to release.
Yeah. But then we did sleep, and I'm really grateful because I did feel a lot of peace. You know, there's some moments like when, you know, they came in to scan me to make sure everything was gone. And, you know, I'm used to having all these scans and seeing my baby moving around, and then, you know, but I didn't feel empty. I still felt his energy. Felt like that area had been his home, and I felt okay seeing that, but it's kind of bleak at the same time. And then the next morning we spent time with him again, which was again just beautiful. And then we straightened ourselves up and we left the hospital, leaving our baby behind, which I don't think he ever feels okay.
Yeah.
With a beautiful memory box provided by a charity called Feilichan. They've been enormously supportive. With, you know, we had his footprints. They provide each hospital with a really good camera, so we had really beautiful photographs of him.
Oh wow.
And they said, just look at these when you're ready. And I mean, we took photographs as well. And it was a really, really bright sunny day, and we collected our son, who was just, couldn't believe Mama and Papa were back. And then we went home, and I sat in the garden, and friends sent us food, which was just the most wonderful thing people could do. They sent us butler's pantry, ready-made meals.
Great.
So we had food, and I played with my son, and it wasn't an unhappy time at first. I was then immediately trying to make myself feel well so that I could visit my daughter in hospital.
Yeah.
Every now and again. She didn't know what was happening. But you're postpartum.
Yeah.
You are postpartum.
And you mean that emotionally, physically, all those things?
Yeah, you know, I had kind of hormonal headaches. My temperature would sometimes go up and down. I was taking lots of antibiotics. I rarely take antibiotics. I'm allergic to most of them, but because of the infection, it was like, we need to make sure you're okay, Rachel. The antibiotics can make you feel strange. And I bled for a very, very, very long time, for about 8 to 10 weeks.
Wow.
It's not necessarily normal, but it's not unheard of either. So, you know, this idea that you can bounce back and be back at work just because you lost your baby early. You know, I'm looking after our son. My daughter was only allowed home if she was on IV antibiotics, and we just wanted her home.
Yeah.
So my husband had to be trained in that.
Wow.
And I kind of think if we can get through that week, we can get through anything. But it wasn't, I don't know, like when I look back, there's a lot of trauma involved around what happened and what happened with Edith being in hospital. And so I'll process that in my own time. But also there was a lot of joy because I'd just given birth and I just had a baby, and that's, I think, that is still something to be joyful about. And I felt really close to him. There's a quote, I won't remember it, so I have it written down on here, and that I still look at and think of. It's by J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan. You know that place between sleep and awake, the place where you can still remember dreaming. That's where I'll always love you. That's where I'll be waiting. And I think in terms of baby loss, that's such a poignant quote because, especially in the early days, I mean, I'll never not be loving him for every second, but in the early days I felt so close to Wolfhart. His energy felt so close to us. And when we told the kids what happened, they were just amazing, wise souls. We planned a funeral together.
So you because you hadn't told them you were pregnant, and so you had to tell them all at once, I was pregnant.
Yeah, there was
I'm
a
not.
tiny baby in my tummy, and the baby died. You know, very straightforward, compassionate language with kids. Yeah. And they were great. Even recently, I was crying, and Gabriel, he's only 2, and he's nearly 3 now. He's like, "What's wrong, Mama?" And I'm like, "I'm just crying about Wolfhart. You know, it's just crying. I'm okay." And he went, "Me come back," and he went and got the memory box.
Wow.
And you know, Edith's just a wonderful, wise soul. She wrote the baby a beautiful letter for the funeral. She had a little cry. Every now and again she'll say, "Do you think Wolfhart would have liked playing this board game with us?"
Wow. So it's still really alive in everybody's hearts and everybody's lives.
Still, you know, he's our son.
He's here. Yeah.
He was our baby. But yeah, no, I think what can happen as well is, again, the wisdom of your body. While I was undergoing the physical symptoms, the grief was more a very beautiful and manageable part of the grief, and then after the physical symptoms subsided, the really unpleasant part of grief kind of engulfed me in waves, and you can't circumnavigate that, nor would you want to. I want my body to process this, and I want to honour the love I felt for Wolfhart. I want to honour his presence, and so I just tried my best with that grief. I know I'd be calling Féileacin and the bereavement midwives at Holles Street. They're very supportive. Talking to other people in the baby loss community, reading books. This will help, but ultimately, you know, just trusting your body and feeling as far as you can, trusting those uncomfortable feelings when they come.
Yeah, like your ability to like elucidate both the actual process of the thing and also your emotional response to it is like, it's kind of overwhelming. Like, did you have a lot of toolkit to deal with grief and to, like, I know you're director of a language school, so language is kind of something, linguistics are kind of your thing, but it sounds like you're very connected to what's going on in your heart at the time, but it hasn't made you close down, and you still had this, I just don't understand it. I really don't understand it, because we're only months past it. And
life experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wouldn't be somebody who's had a hugely easy life, but I look at each experience as learning, and I want to do the best I can for my kids. I'm no stronger or more wise than anybody else. I could have a really bad month next time you see me, you know, and I have had some really awful times in this. But ultimately, you know, I loved this little boy, and I'm so grateful he visited us, even if it was just for a short while. You know, there'll be times when I think, oh, you know, he would have been starting school, that might not feel so good. You know, he would have been opened us up to perhaps a different community with him having Down syndrome, and there's times when I think we're missing out on that. But ultimately, I'm just trying to be guided as much as I can by love and honesty.
Fair dues.
And just feeling.
It's amazing for your kids to see that process that you're going through so openly and so honestly, because I think so often with our kids we want to protect them from the really hard stuff, and then unwittingly we give them this message which is like, you just suppress that stuff and you only talk about the good stuff and you only show them the joy. And I think it seems like you're doing such a good job of being able to template that.
Not always, honestly. One part of grief is anger, and I was really surprised when that bubbled up in us all. But again, you know, we're good at repair, and we came together afterwards, and sometimes those blow-ups did well. That I wasn't always this idyllic mum grieving well. Ultimately, I wanted to show them that I was always emotionally available to them, that I didn't disappear. And so sometimes it was warts and all, but there's really that focus of, I think it's more frightening for a kid if they can sense something's going on.
Yeah.
So it becomes the elephant in the room, and I think that's far more damaging.
Yeah, absolutely, always.
For children.
For all of us, I think, but that's usually what most of us growing up in good old Catholic, etc., whatever, Ireland have kind of experienced. So any, you know, movement towards, you know, emotional maturity and having a language around your emotions from the early age. I mean, I see it in so many kids these days because the parents are our generation who've learnt from that generation, and they just have this kind of innate sense of things that I don't. Yeah, that their processing ability just seems to be far ahead.
Yeah. I mean, my kids have really sort of led the way in some ways as well. But yeah, no, you know, it's been perfectly imperfect journey through this so far.
And tell me about, so my best friend just had a baby this week, but last year she lost a baby at around 6.5 months pregnant, maybe 7 months, and I was unable to be with her because she was in England and I was here, and for me, when she went into hospital and they induced her, that process ended up taking a week before her baby was born, and it was like, I mean, I was devastated in that week, and it wasn't me losing my baby, but I was losing her baby, and she was my best friend. You know, I was so excited to have a relationship with her baby, and I know how much I felt in that time, and what happened afterwards was, and from little conversations I had with her, was that I had sent her a necklace which had her daughter May's name on it and then her birth constellation. And I got my friend Chupi, who's a jewelry designer here in Ireland, to make it up. I know. And when I had asked her to do that, a couple of people in her team or different people around her had said, like, do you think this is the right thing to do? Do you think it's okay to send this necklace? Do you think it's an appropriate thing to do now? Like, will she want to wear a necklace with May's name on it, and how will that be? But I felt really strongly that even if she had that as like a little talisman, that it was like an acknowledgement of, here's your baby that I saw you have, and that I have a relationship to this baby. And she said that afterwards it was really challenging because nobody wanted to talk about May, and it was like May just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And even to this day that's the case. You know, she's like, I've had a second baby, not a first. This is my second baby.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
No, I mean, some friends have been through similar, so they kind of knew what I needed before I did, but I mean, each woman is different. You know, I lost our third baby. It's probably very different. It is very different to losing your first. I didn't come home without a child to hold. I had two of them. But I received some wonderful support from friends who've been through similar. I did get a necklace with his initial on, and I wore it proudly until it almost fell apart. Some friends sent a cherry blossom tree, which blossoms in April when he was born. Actually, people sent me all sorts of lovely things, and it did really help, because you get sent lovely things when you have a baby who lives. So it felt really healing when people went out of the way to think. One friend wrote something that's really poignant in a card: "We will remember him." And I was just so grateful for that. Just, you know, we will remember him, because I remember speaking to my grandmother a few years before she passed away. She had 8 living children, but she lost twins, possibly around a similar gestation. And even a few years before she died, when she was in her 80s, she remembered their names, she remembered where they were buried, she remembered what they looked like when they were born. I've spoken to so many people since this who are like, 30 years ago I lost a little baby. So I think you did the right thing. This baby is important, is loved. This baby was here, and even if sometimes you find things uncomfortable at first, and years later you're glad you've got the photographs of the baby, you're glad you've got something to remember the baby by. You're going through all sorts of firsts, so just let each woman have the chance to talk if they want to, or not, or leave the door open. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing that you did, and I'm sure your friend was very grateful.
No, it's just so easy to run away from that discomfort, both for the mum who's going through it, but also for the friends and family of the mum as well, because that discomfort is like, I mean, what's the right thing to say? Like, you know, what do you actually raise in that moment?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Somebody actually said, you know, what did you name your baby? That was the next sentence. What's his name? And that was lovely. I was so grateful to be able to say his name. Some people said congratulations on the birth of your baby, and I was so grateful for that. I actually called one of my old housemates. I remembered she lost a baby 10 years ago, and she was really, you know, giving me lots of advice and support. And then we talked about her lost baby, and I was the first person in 10 years to say, actually, do you know what, congratulations on her birth and the fact that she was here. It is uncomfortable to talk about, but life is beautiful at times and uncomfortable at times. And it's about embracing it all.
My gran lost a baby just between my mum and her sister, and it was in a time when there was serious rationing on fuel, and this little baby had, I think, a lung issue as far as I remember, and they weren't able to keep it warm enough realistically in the house over the winter, and she lost the baby. And she, I mean, Gran was like 94 when she died, and still like strong Presbyterian woman, but I think the chat about that wasn't had like that openly. Everybody knows about it. Everybody, like, there was, but it wasn't like discussed as a, I suppose, as a, you know, in the same way actually as even when my dad died as well. There's a sort of a move on. His place at the table is gone, sort of thing, and it's difficult to know. I think, and it's like you say, it's different from person to person. But I think the more we can develop that access to being able to celebrate loss in the same way as you celebrate joy is like so important.
Yeah. I mean,
And not to treat, because you're saying like you weren't sad, like you were sad, but you didn't, like, the sadness wasn't the primary emotion. And it's weird, in that celebration it moves through all those different emotions all at once. It's
good, even if some really don't feel good at the time. It's as simple as a baby was born, and I wanted to acknowledge it and celebrate it and feel genuinely grateful that he was here. He's touched our lives, and he's still teaching us the lessons he came to teach us.
Yeah, all very fresh, and I wonder in a decade what those lessons will look like. It'll be
It's no time at all. I haven't felt ready to return to work yet. In the middle of a global pandemic as well, and all of that, so there was lots going on. And what was great about my children going back to school and starting preschool was that I finally had just a couple of hours in the day where I could then process some of the stuff that was deeply personal. And there's always going to be some element that you want to grieve by yourself, and that's okay too. So I felt the last few weeks has given me the chance to do that. And then we'll see. I mean, we had some good news 3 months ago in that I'm expecting another baby.
I wasn't sure if we were able to touch on this. I wasn't sure how.
No, I've told people now.
That's huge.
That's the scariest thing I've ever done. I did not enjoy the first 3 months.
Just feeling that, like, it's too precious. It's just too precious.
I know it's now to have a pregnancy and you don't take a baby home at the end of it, and it feels strange. It's Wolfhart's due date in 2 weeks. Now I'm expecting his little sister, and that just feels. It's a lot to get my head around, but it's at the stage now. We had the genetic results, and this baby is healthy, which was bittersweet. But it's now about, there's a season for everything, and it's now about being joyful about this new stage. So, but it was not a joy-free pregnancy at first. There was lots of bleeding. There was morning sickness, which is a good sign, but it did not make me feel good.
And it was worse than your previous pregnancies in that way.
It was. I think when I have girls, I have really bad morning sickness.
Okay, all right, okay. So, but you've forgotten how Edith.
No. I remember it being pretty bad, but even now, the last 2 days, I felt slightly better, so I can barely remember what it was like, but it was bad.
All right, well, I believe it, yeah.
It's we're incredibly grateful, but what a roller coaster.
Huge. And was that a conscious choice that you made to try to get pregnant again, or it just
my body
naturally happened?
Just trusted my body. I'm incredibly surprised.
I'm sure, yeah.
I didn't test. My husband's like, you should take a test. I was like, no, I can't. And lots of it was very triggering. Going back to the same clinic to have the genetic test was very triggering. But there's. I always promised myself that if I were to fall pregnant again, I'd feel very grateful and cherish every day, because I'm glad I really enjoyed the pregnancy with Wolfhart. And then I couldn't really honour that promise to myself for the first 3 months. I just couldn't. But now this week has been a turning point, and that I can. And we've made the joyful pregnancy announcements, and the kids are excited, and I'll still have to negotiate the waves of grief when they come. I'm going to be really mindful of that, especially around actually giving birth, I think. But I will take that, and I will try my best to honour each wave when it comes.
Yeah.
What do you feel? I don't know how the question is, but what support is needed? What is the thing that people who are friends or family or colleagues of someone who's gone through a loss like that, what is the support that they can do? Like, what is the most helpful thing?
Just for the practical side was people sending us food. We didn't have to cook.
Yeah.
We had a few weeks when we didn't even have to think about cooking, which is it's an amazing thing to do. And people asking, it was really difficult during lockdown. Nobody could help us with the children. And we spent a lot of time with the children just in the woods, which was really healing. But then when things got a bit easier. People taking the children for a few hours. 1 or 2 families who helped us out.
Yeah.
Try and keep the COVID bubble as small as possible. And then just people letting us know that they were thinking of us. Some people sent me books for baby loss. Even just a card made all the difference. And people sending their prayers from whatever faith background they come from. People being available if I need to talk to them. My wonderful neighbour, who I'm very close to, came and stood outside she couldn't come in the house because this is at the height of the pandemic. She stood outside my window and cried with me. And that meant the world. And she was like, any time of the day or night, knock on my door. Any time. Just, there's no boundaries there. And that was really useful, just to know that kind of support was there. So for friends and family, it's just naming the baby and acknowledging the baby. That was what I needed. It really is about just trying to gauge where somebody else is. Some people may not want that level of openness that I did. I found most people do. Everybody I've spoken to so far generally wants that. They want their baby to remember, but some people aren't ready to unpack that straight away, and that's okay too. So it's about just saying I'm sorry and I'm here, and every now and again checking in, and keeping that door always open. And you're dropping food off. I mean, flowers. Like, we got loads of flowers, and that was lovely. Just have beautiful flowers around the house.
It's interesting in apothecary, like old school apothecary tradition, one of the first laws of apothecary is that remedies must be beautiful in order to heal. And you kind of, I mean, we definitely don't take it into account these days when we're talking about prescription bottles, little brown things with the labels on them. But there's something about beauty that is healing, like flowers, nature, being in the woods, that sort of stuff. I think in this year as well, where people have felt, more restricted than ever before, the access to nature, which has been there in limited amounts, has made a massive difference. And I've seen people are now running to that in a way that just
people
they
are
never
really
did before.
Turning to that. In the woods that we thought were our little secret are really busy.
You forget it.
I'm glad that nature was our healing teacher after this. And I don't know, I'd encourage anyone who's going through this just to reach out. The bereavement team at Hollis Street were incredible, and then even if years later I need to call them, they're there.
Really? So speak to us about that team. Like, what are they profession-wise? Because we're actually about to do a podcast with a postnatal doula who deals with kind of grief and loss. Like, what are the people in there who what team is that?
It's a specialist. I think there are 3 midwives.
Okay.
I've had dealings with 3 midwives who come and see you after you've lost your baby. They guide you through the next steps, the formalities. For example, we could have arranged the funeral ourselves, or they just completely take it over and do it all for you.
Oh.
And so we chose for them we looked at a few different they deal with Glasnevin, and we looked at a few different possibilities. We thought, no, we'll go with them because they do everything. And we just turned up, and so Wolfhart is in the Angels plot. They deal with all of that. They're there to answer your questions. Even little things like, I wanted the blanket he was wrapped in, but I was scared he'd be cold if he didn't have it. And it took me a few days to realise I can ask them to wrap him in another blanket and I'll have his. And they did that, and they wrote to me, listen, here's the blanket, but we've wrapped him up in 2 blankets and he looks so cosy, Rachel. And just them saying that. So, they're trained in the physical side and the emotional side of it. If you can go down the counselling route, or you can just say to them every now and again, can we schedule in a chat, and they'll make sure they have an hour free. What's really useful is about 8 weeks later they organise a debrief, so you can go in and just ask the questions that you were too shocked to ask at the time.
Yeah, of course.
They help you understand a bit what happened. Our consultant was there as well to answer any of the more medical questions, and just with such utter compassion. This is the consultant who, when we found out our baby would have Down syndrome, he said, whatever you decide, Rachel, there's no judgment here, but your baby will get the best level of care whatever happens, which, just again, these little things that people say that mean the world. So, he was great afterwards, and so this team is just invaluable. what they do. And these people who donate the little blankets and the little clothes and the little hats and just practical.
So sorry, there's a team of people who just like home knitters sort of
There's
thing?
a charity that
cool.
they ask people to. I learned to crochet, so I'm going to crochet some little blankets.
I was going to say,
Tiny
I'm sure that this is going to become part of your, kind of closing the loop as well, is it? To feed back into that and help other mothers.
When I'm ready, I'll make some blankets that are the same size that Wolfhart would have appreciated, so that another woman can benefit from that. But yeah, it's about reaching out to professionals, but also reaching out to the baby loss community. I'd never been into Instagram, but I found that really helpful. Linking with other people on forums who've been through similar, linking with Felican, and I think it's called Precious Little Footprints. There's another charity, so they were organising Zoom support groups, and some of them, these offer free counselling, and then there's low cost counselling to do with baby loss, and then the everything is free. Nobody should feel like if they can't afford it, they can't access it.
Yeah, okay, it's all there.
Accessible,
Okay. Yeah.
Accessible help, and then even years down the line, if you feel you need it, if you're getting to a milestone. I know somebody who was quite upset when it's like, my daughter will be doing the first Holy Communion now, reaching out at those points as well. These supports never go away. It's just make sure that you access them. I found reading really helpful. That's my thing. Lots of books. But then there was a time when I didn't want to read those books anymore. I put them down.
Yeah.
Meditating.
And what any particular books?
So there's a book called Ask Me His Name by a famous blogger.
It's weird you say blogger.
Blogger, yeah. No, she's an influencer on Instagram, and she kept this beautiful blog afterwards, and that's a really lovely book. Somebody sent me a book called Loved Baby. It's a very, very Christian book, but I'm very open to language from any source, and it was actually just so comforting and nourishing. The Baby Loss Guide. I can send you some afterwards.
Yeah, great. And we'll put links and show that stuff out.
Really beautiful things to read out there.
Great.
I think the most a kind of a really poignant thing that's come up for me through being with my friends through their journey and through listening to you talk is that we as a community don't tend to do well with things we can't see. Like, faith is this thing, right, that people talk about. Well, how can you know there's a God? Because you can't see there's a God. And I think if people lose a baby who is 1 or 2 or 3 months old, and people have seen the baby and they've met the baby, and for them it's like a real baby, we're really good at reaching out through that grief to provide support. But there seems to be this divide in our minds between babies who are lost when they're still during that pregnancy time in the womb, and the babies that are born and then die afterwards. And I think what I've come to learn is that there really isn't a difference in the grief, right? Like for the mum, you're like, that's still my baby. It doesn't matter how old it was. We connect. And I remember when Reuben he started kicking really early. I think he was like 14 weeks when I first felt the kicks, and everyone said, oh, you can't feel the kicks, it's just air bubbles. I was like, no, I know these kicks. And he, sure enough, he was like kicking constantly his whole, and still is that kid. That's the connection. I mean, it's there. It's already like, that is a real baby. You don't think like, oh, this is like half a bit of a baby that's kind of a baby. It's like, here's my whole baby. Yeah. And I think that what's so great about people like you who are open to sharing their stories is that it gives people permission to say, you know what, my grief is just as real as the grief of someone who lost their 3-year-old. Like, this is still the grief of my child. And I think for people who know people who've been through loss, that miscarriage isn't just like having a period that you just kind of go, oh yeah, it was a bit of a bad period, and sure, now get on with your life, and sure, go to the next baby, or don't have another baby, or whatever. It wasn't a big thing. It's a huge loss. It's the same. And I think that the more we can get our heads around that as a society, the more it enables us to provide the support to the people who've been through it in a real way.
Absolutely. I have been surprised at how open I am about it. But ultimately, I think you never know when you might help somebody or touch somebody or give them permission to touch into their own grief now or in the future. And I think society, because you kind of think, does everybody in the world need to know about Baby Loss Awareness Month? But actually, yes, because it's a part of life. Like, what could be more fundamental to life than pregnancy? It's where we all came from, and if society would be a little bit healthier in the long run if we can just be open.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk about it to the nth degree. You don't have to get into a big long chat with somebody, but you can. If we all just know that, even just saying, "Listen, I'm sorry you went through that," or even just say, "I don't know what to say."
Yeah.
And that can help. And even just for employers to know, like, hang on a minute, why isn't so-and-so back at work yet? Oh, right, actually, you can bleed for 10 weeks. You can...
Yeah, the
your
physical
milk can
measurement.
come in. You can actually feel okay for a while, then suddenly 6 months later, the grief floors you. So for everybody to know that it's not a linear journey, and you might need more time than it looks like from the outside.
Yeah.
Rather than people rushing back into their normal lives and then they crash months later, and that negatively affects everybody around them, their workload, for example, just taking work as the example. So it really is about just being honest about the journey and what you need in that individual journey, and just honouring that. And then hopefully that has a ripple effect on everything then being better around you, because you're doing the best you can, not what you think you should be doing.
Yeah. That's
And I read a thing this week where someone was talking about saying how, ironically, or actually not ironically, just obviously, but it seems ironic, that when we begin to open up discussions around death, when we begin to talk about death, it gives us the opportunity to really live, to really appreciate life in all the ways. And we've been so scared of that, and we just want to hide it, but there isn't a separate cycle. And I think that's why nature's been so comforting for everyone in this time, and for people who are going through grief, because you're just confounded with cycles. I mean, you're just being bombarded with them constantly, and we can't just look at the one side of the cycle and then think that we're able to live fully. When we talk into death and we acknowledge it, and we bring it into our houses and around our kitchen tables and we chat, it allows the grieving to happen, but it also really allows the living.
Yeah, the gratitude for the now. And I find, especially as a parent anyway, there's so much judgment out there for the parenting choices you make. And then you're constantly, there can be lots of self-doubt. Am I doing right by my kids? And this has just really brought me back to just lack of judgment for myself. Everybody's doing their best, appreciating and loving the moment that you're in with your family, your kids, your work, whatever it is that your passion is. Really, lots of things that I thought mattered don't.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah, like a lot of people, I think, as well, during lockdown have noticed a lot of those things in their life that they would have attached to, whether it be like maybe friendships that were like maybe slightly more meaningless than they thought of. They're suddenly looking for, actually, no, what does this mean for me, and do I value it, and what value do I place in it, and am I willing to give it my energy, sort of thing. It strips a lot of things away, and I'd imagine going through a process like you have has a similar effect in terms of, like, knowing that you're one human, like, and you're trying your best, and you'll do where you can, and where you can't, that's it. But forgiveness.
Really, like I said, the lessons that he brought to us are still just in their infancy, and over the years we'll take much more and more out of this experience.
Well, thank you very much for the chat. That was really beautiful, and
thank you.
It was amazing to share that. I just think it's a really powerful, very brave human to do it. So fair dues.
No, well, thank you. Always any excuse to come and have the chat.
Anyway. Cool. Well, that too. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you feel as privileged as we do to have had access to Rachel's story. And brief glib message: our sponsors must be mentioned. Newzest Nutrition, please use our code wellness15, and also don't forget Clear Light Saunas and Swivel, this thing that we're recording on, which allows us to do all of this education and get our podcast out to you guys. So again, thanks for watching, and thank you, Rachel.
And if you want to know about some of the books that Rachel mentioned, or some of the charities around infant loss, we will put the links in our footnotes. And if you have any questions for any of us, please let us know. For now, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you.